introing?
No.
I'll just cut this out.
Elyse,
Oh,
is
sure.
it your intro?
Sure.
It's not mine.
Is it? We should have a bloopers reel.
No,
Be real.
be real.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spirit Coffee Talk. So
Sorry.
What are we talking about?
I'm leaving this in.
Oh God. Strong start. Strong start.
Oh.
Strong Star, welcome to Spirit Coffee Talk. My name's Elyse. I feel like this happens a lot of the time that I intro. I am the worst introer. I apologize for all of our.
You are not. I'm
not
the
at
worst
all.
introvert.
I feel like I'm
No.
like just rambling on and on and on, and I'm like, okay, bring it back, Elyse. Anyways, welcome,
No.
welcome everyone. Happy Saturday. It's good to see you all. We are the mediums and channelers, or some of the mediums and channelers on Avalon Spirit. I'm joined by the lovely Lisa and Ginette. And we come to you every week, sometimes a little more composed than others, to talk to you about all things spirit, universe, and we have coffee. Oh, I love that mug, Lisa. Every time you have it, I'm like,
Thank you.
I want
I
it.
know.
Anyways, I don't need any more
Beautiful.
mugs. I will be thrown out of my home if I purchase any more mugs.
I'll probably buy you 10 more.
Please do. Yeah. And then
I
I'm like,
love
I didn't
mugs.
buy them. It's
Yeah.
not mine.
Mugs are the best.
I know.
Yeah.
I would get
Mugs
rid of
and
every.
hoodies.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yes. We
I'm
got
on a
very
slight-
serious on the hoodies.
Slight hoodie addiction right now.
Oh my God, me too. I just bought a couple more. Here's one of them. Like, yeah. Comfort.
And
Comfort.
and if I can, matching sweatpants. So I
Mm.
can have the whole comfort level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
It feels like wearing a blanket, and I
Yeah.
just who doesn't want to do that? That's why fundamentally I think sometimes my spirit is like no to hot weather, because I just always want to wear a hoodie because it just feels like a hug. I
Mhm.
saw
Totally.
I was getting influenced on social media. There's these like weighted ones, like it's like a heavy fabric. And
Oh,
I was
really?
like, ooh, I want that. I feel
No.
like
Oh,
somatically my body would like that. They're
I
not
would
You
feel
guys seen,
confined. I
have
would
you
lose
seen
it.
the
but they're
Huggies?
huge.
I would lose it. I would be like a
Really?
cat in a bag in that thing. I would be like biting it. It's so funny. I love a weighted blanket, but if you put something that's got like sleeves and like I can't whip it off right away, I'm like a cat in a bag.
I
Okay.
can see that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when hoodies like, and I have to keep pulling like this, that really annoys
Yeah, I
me
don't
too.
like
Like
that.
the,
Lisa,
it's like,
I'm gonna send you these ones because they have a big neck and a ginormous hood, and they're like massively oversized and weighted. So
Maybe that becomes our Spirit Coffee Talk uniform.
yes. Okay, have you guys seen these
hoods up.
Huggy things that are like stuffy? They're almost like squishmallows. But you put their arms on you like that,
Yes.
and they're weighted, and you
Yes.
actually
Yeah.
hold them, and it just feels like
It's
somebody
like a
is like
hug.
holding
Yeah.
you.
I would be down for that.
I want one.
So down for that.
Yeah. See, and I can't do weighted blankets because my loosey-goosey joints, I feel like it like dislocates my knees and my ankles. John used to have a weighted blanket, and I was like, I don't know how you sleep with this thing. I wake up in the morning and like every joint in my body was like,
Interesting.
no.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
feel like if it's on my shoulders at least, those are already out of their sockets. So like, it is what it is, whether I have it or
Yeah.
not.
I do not move. I sleep in a tight curled ball as far away from my husband as possible. No offense to him, but I can't be around like energy when I'm trying to sleep. So we have a huge king size, and I take up this much space because I'm like curled into this little protective ball. So I feel like a weighted blanket would like allow me to feel
Mm,
completely protected and in my own little cozy cave.
What about
yeah.
Oh,
pets
that
though? Pet
sounds.
energy okay? Close to you?
Oh yeah, bring on the pets. As long
Yeah.
as my cats,
Humans.
see my cats, like the only thing about my cats is that they'll when they get so like happy and like they lick my face. And so in the middle of the
Mhm.
night when I'm woken up to like a sandpaper tongue on my face, that's so hard for me. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
out to go. But generally
Sensory
speaking, I
nightmare.
have as many animals around me as possible because their frequency is like loving. I
Mhm.
Mhm.
love it. Animals are different.
They are. I hear you.
Except for
So
the
what's our
This is
topic
not
today?
what we were going to talk
know.
about
Okay,
today.
but
Weighted blankets and sleeping.
my brain was
That's
like, all
funny.
right, how are we segueing? How are we? But
Tie
it
it in.
came to me.
Tie it
Came to
in.
me. Spirit came, or my brain, I don't know. Um, we're talking about higher selves today and how we connect with our higher selves. And I feel like this rambly old tangent that we just went on was great segue into how each of our higher selves are very different. We all have different alignments with our higher selves. And I think that when we like connect with something that's like, yes, I love this thing, or I like really don't like this thing, or whatever it is, sure, we could, psychologically tie that to our brain, but I also think it's a deep expression of who we are, and that is a part of our higher selves.
Yeah.
So today we were going to talk all about higher selves, but also how do you connect to it? What does that show up like in your spiritual practice? What does that look like? How is it different than connecting to your guides, or maybe past loved ones, or other energies that are out there, and what that looks like for us? So welcome. After that lengthy
That's
intro.
awesome. That's awesome. Well, Kate, let's start with this. I'm curious what your higher selves look like to you, how you experience your higher self, because I will say before my NDE, my higher self was like an orb. It was like an energy orb. And it had a very neutral voice. I actually couldn't hear the voice. I could hear it, but it like didn't have a voice. And my higher self didn't have a personality, so to speak, until I had my NDE. And my higher self showed itself looking like me, like I do, but when I had like dark black hair, but looking similar to me, and actually has the personality of Tony Vandermeer. If anyone has ever had a reading with Tony from Avalon Spirit, Tony is so loving, and she'll also just tell you how it is. Like, this is just what it is. Like, just to the point also. And so there's this like energy that Tony has that reminds me of my higher self. So that's how I see it now. So I'm curious, how do you both see your higher self? Like, what does it like look like to you? Or feel? Like, how do you know it's your higher self?
Elyse, you go first.
So I, in my experience, there's kind of like, how would I want to say this? So for me, and again, like we always say, this is, I think, so different for everybody. There's aspects of there's the piece of us that is from spirit, right? Like, and that is our soul self, our higher self. And we can have pieces of that come into our human being and live within us. And there's this connection up to kind of the greater piece. And then also that which is living in us. To say it in a very 3D way, I don't feel like I'm actually explaining that very well. But for me, because we have lives connected in with our higher self, like we could go into a whole conversation about how past lives make up the way in which our higher self presents itself to us, if that makes sense. And so for me, there's kind of two pieces. There's the higher self that is this like connected to the source energy, which feels very ethereal. But what I find is that higher self versions from past lives tend to actually show up more. And so the one that shows up a little more frequently, she's spicy. She's got a big energy. She is like, for me, it feels like she's like right up in my face and like, oh, and that aspect of self will come through very intensely, but like loving and direct, but intense, not like soft and gentle. It's like, here we are. And here's, you asked, here we go. That tends to be very connected into very specific experiences and things and pieces of wisdom. When it's like the aspect of my higher self that's like connected up into spirit and that source energy, it feels it doesn't have as much of like a face and an embodiment. It's like this big white energy that
That's awesome.
like fills the room. So
Yeah.
I get the two, right? The past life kind of higher self part comes in like "Mah," literally, and then lovingly, and then the other one is like big, kind of wraps around me, warm energy, white energy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How about you, Lisa?
Yeah, I feel like it's really hard to explain because it's more of an energy than like a visual. So, at least I get what you're saying in the sense of like almost like the energy of your guidance system or like this life's path carries a certain like energy team that you kind of work with that carries its own frequency, but the overlying higher self of that of your Akashics kind of thing, of the beginning to the end simultaneously is one that is your connection to source
Mm,
is kind of another in that sense,
that's
is
a way
how
better way to
I
describe it.
interpreted it when you said it. But yeah, when I ask for kind of like a visual, when I'm like I connect into my higher self, um, it's just an energy feeling for me. It's not like they show me. I guess in the way in which I can describe it to words would be very similar. At least like kind of like a veil, like a bride's veil, like that white kind of, and it's always behind me a little bit, and it kind of is like this like white energetic frequency that is the kind of gateway of consciousness, the gateway to my like overlying self. That's kind of how I describe it.
Mhm. So then coming back to the question that we had of like, how do you connect into your higher self, right? Like, depending on however people watching this identify them their higher selves, obviously you can see from the three of us, there's many different ways,
Mhm.
and it can present itself to you also in many different ways. But once you make that connection to like identify it, how do you tap in? Like, what is your, do you just call your higher self and be like, hey, can we chat? Or how do you go into that? What does that look like for you?
I do every day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I clear my energy every morning in different ways. Usually I use Palo Santo, but I'll clear my energy and I'll just say like removing any lower density frequency, and I connect into my highest consciousness. I connect into my higher self in my highest consciousness timeline, and allowing any lower frequencies to dissipate and connecting my heart, and like so that it's like kind of like a prayer I do every morning to be able to connect into that energy so that I can familiarize myself that day with that frequency almost. And then it's like your intuition. That's how I like to describe it. It's
Mhm.
almost like you're just like when you connect into your higher self. Maybe that's just another term for like really knowing and getting to know and cultivating a bond, a relationship, a trust with your intuition is kind of how I feel, because my higher self will communicate with me through forms that I can just use the same word as my intuition, essentially.
Mhm.
So it'll be like a lot of times through my body, I'll get that feeling that'll move through my body, and I'll get the cues in my physical body of things, and that just the ultimate knowing where things will just kind of come through the channel, all of that. It's like that's because I have a steady stream available through my higher self, that steady stream of consciousness to my higher self, right? Sometimes I've got to
Mhm.
turn it off, but
Mhm.
Mhm.
that's kind of my
Yeah.
best way of describing it. I don't think that it's really compartmentalized for me.
Yeah. That's why I was
Makes
pausing
sense.
because I was like, do I have something interesting to say on this? I don't know if I do. It just feels like it's part of um my practice of connecting with myself, like mind, body, and spirit. So that can look a little bit different depending on the day and how I'm feeling and um what I need. But I would say that through any practice of well-being that I'm doing, whether that's like movement, like somatic work or exercising, meditation, journaling, tuning in for myself, um, and even in readings and things, I'll call my higher self
Oh
in.
yeah. Oh, always.
Um,
Yeah.
it's like it's just kind of part of all of it. And So if I'm like, to use a very, 3D example, if I'm like, oh, my body gets cranky a lot. And so I'll be like, oh, my body feels really sore right now. And I'll go and I know I need to like move or stretch or do something. I'll take a few breaths before that to like drop into myself. And whenever I'm dropping into myself mentally, spiritually, or like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, whatever, there's like this innate understanding. And I think I've cultivated that over just consciously, actively doing it, that I'm calling in that aspect of self and like reconnecting with it. Um, and so it's just kind of part of me, which
Hmm.
it feels like a non-answer. That's why I'm kind of struggling to
No.
articulate it. Um, because it's just like there, like I'm talking to her all the time. Whenever I'm asking questions for myself, I tend to ask my higher self more than spirit, because she knows my shit more.
Yeah,
Um,
or my guides, my higher
yeah,
self and my guides, I'll
yeah,
say. But
yeah.
like my higher self is the one that I know, like when I'm in like a fury of my 3D shit, I know I can feel my higher self just in non-judgment and love, but she's not leading the meeting. She's just observing, right? And I
Mhm.
can see it and I'm like, okay, I need to, feel all this and go all the way through it. But when I connect into my higher self and feel her presence or feel her her guidance, it's very different than like a judgmental, like 3D perspective of this is what I need to do at this point now, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
But you, Jeanette, you got
Yeah.
lots going on over there.
Well, no, so I found an image to describe it because I'm listening to you both and I'm realizing how predominantly clairvoyant I am. Like I rely so much on clairvoyance. Um, I think even more than clairsentience.
Mm.
And I'm just cluing into this right now. I'm like, something really interesting here. Because so this is kind of what it looks like. I know
Mhm.
this is the tree of life. Okay, so
The
this is
tree of
a
life,
traditional
yeah.
tree of life. This is how I see my council, though. Like I talk a lot about my council. Like this is me at the bottom. And then my different council members kind of file in here. Shaham, my main guide, is always in the center. My higher self is always this top one. And
Hmm.
so when I connect in, I kind of go like ping, 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 ping. And then I hit that higher one. And that one to me is like this bright light, unless she needs to manifest like a person. But for me, I know I'm connecting in when I see it.
Mm.
And I have like, I can feel it, but I know I'm there when I see it. And that's why I'm just having this moment. I'm like, wow, I rely so much on clairvoyance, more
Mhm.
than I even realized. Like the other ones filter in and stuff, but like, how do I know I see it? How do I know this?
Yeah.
Oh, I see it. I'm just having this epiphany. That's why my brain's like, interesting. But yeah, like, so I connect in
Which is
that way.
very handy. The
It
fact that
is
Mhm.
you
very
see it.
handy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm realizing, I realize that too. Um, yeah, I will put the period there. I'm realizing that too, like how handy that is. Um, the interesting thing is though, when I am not able to connect in, like when I need to rest my body or just whatever, I will get no visual at all. It's like staring at a black computer screen, nothing there, nothing available. And I have to relax even further at that point then to feel it because we
Mhm.
can always feel them around. Whereas both of you are so strong in feeling it right away. I realize it's always visual for me and then I feel. And when the visuals cut off, I'm like, what? And then I have to like simmer down and then feel into it.
Yeah.
So I actually have to work a little harder to feel. And I think that's because my brain is always like flying around here that I have to get back in my body.
Mm.
I feel like that could be true. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I have a similar thing, but in reverse, where I can feel it, but then if my brain's like, I don't say anything, they're not here. And and then my brain gets pissy about it because it wants that visual confirmation.
Mhm.
So I feel like, especially if we're tuning in, usually that's in a space of like not tuning in for ourselves, but when we're tuning in a time where like we're needing guidance, like we've spoken about this before, where we're like, I need something, and then you don't get it in the way that you're anticipating. My brain, anyways, has usually a little like hissy fit with that. And that's when I have to just be like, okay, you're just in it. Like, just be. You let go of trying to, which is challenging, but let
Mhm.
go of trying to get an answer. Just like let your mind, body, spirit rest here, and
Yeah.
hopefully something will come.
Yeah.
I'm in that phase right now. Like I'm literally in that phase. I remember being here a couple years ago where I would show up for meditation and I just get nothing. I get nothing. I get nothing for myself, nothing, nothing. And I'm back in that phase right now. So I'm having to actually tap into more of the feel, which is why, again, when you were both talking, I'm like, wow, I'm learning this huge click moment for myself here because I'm having to surrender not seeing anything for me when I tune in and rather feeling it in through my body fully, which is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting.
I'm curious if either of you have the experience, and if so, what it looks like around, we're like living life, humaning, da 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 da, and then all of a sudden your higher self like comes through you.
Oh yeah.
What does that look like? How does that feel for you?
It depends on like what I'm doing.
Yeah,
So if
fair.
it's a direct message for somebody, like I can feel it because it'll just come out like um and it'll come out in the way in which the person needs to understand. So if I need to explain it with a visual and they give me like a super strong visual, then I'll be like, this is what they're showing because I know that person needs to hear it from that perspective. Most times it's just a knowing. It'll just be like blah, 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 like I've known you my whole life. I've said this before. But sometimes it's like they just keep giving it to me like physically, right? Like it'll come through so strong and I'll feel it in my body and be like, holy smokes, are you ever holding your stuff in your tummy? Like something's going down here. And I didn't know that for so long because I thought it was me, right? I thought I was like, oh my God, I've got stomach issues all the time. I got this, and it's just like an empath that doesn't realize that they're feeling other people's feelings. Well, I can feel other people's physical. And so that's another thing. So sometimes I ask my higher self to be very clear about what's mine and what's not mine. Is this a message for somebody else? I really need to, like when I'm in a reading, obviously I know it's for that person. But if I'm like hanging out and like at pickup and all of a sudden I see this mom and she's talking away and like her heart hurts so bad and all this stuff and I see all these visuals in my head or I have this knowing and I'll be like, oh, and then I'll be like, no, that's good. Thanks. I don't need to go and talk to this random stranger mom and be like, oh, you're having some marital problems, right? Like I'm not going to do it, but it still comes through sometimes. And so you wonder, it's free will, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think that the more that we are used to knowing when it's an intuitive download or when your higher self is trying to tell you something, when you're used to that, then you can be like, okay, yeah, no, or like turn off, or like, yes, go with it. Instead of being like, is this mine? Oh my God, I'm doing this. I'm crazy. I'm having, like when you're starting to get used to the difference, right? For me, it's like this very, that's why I say it's kind of like intuition too. It's like, I just know.
Mm-hmm.
90% of my life is based in that intuitive state, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't hang out with people and do much outside of parenting and
Yeah.
readings.
Yeah.
Honestly, that
Fair.
between the two, I'm either doing readings or I'm parenting, both of which I rely heavily on my higher self. So,
True. Very
do
true.
you see our higher selves?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can if I tune in. Yeah.
Do they present, and for you guys, when you do tune into other people's higher selves, do they show up visually? Can you feel them energetically? Do they show up differently dependent on what that person's learning, or is it an overlying same higher soul? Does it ever does it ever change? That's a good question.
Good
Way to go,
question.
Lisa.
I always see them as the orb, like I was talking about before, like that orb source energy. It's just this higher, bright, vibrant, kind of like white, pale yellow light that sits above the
Okay.
person. That's how I will know it's the higher self. But how about you, Elise? Because you tap into higher selves all the time.
Yeah, that's the same for me. Like a lot of times in readings, I'll be like, they, and they're like, who's they? And I'm like, oh, like just you. I don't know. Like I don't have it's not like a spirit or a specific thing or like a person that looks like this. It's kind of an overarching energy. Um,
Do they ever
that
take
I feel.
form then, dependent on what that person is going through? Like, will a higher self take a form?
I think for me and my experience, it's been similar to what I've experienced with myself in that it's like then a piece of it shoots off from like a specific embodiment that it wants to show, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a part of that higher self comes down and is like, oh, hey. And then it is maybe a past life thing or for me, that's actually, now I'm kind of putting this together. For me, that's how past lives show up, actually, is like, it's like boop, coming down and then speaking from that place. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think I'd like
That's
linearly
so cool
thought
how
of it like that.
everybody's so different.
And I had never thought of it, Lisa, when you were saying it's my intuition. I was like, oh, yeah, duh. Like, it is my intuition. I don't
Mhm.
feel that, like, I feel like tuning into spirits, energies, beings is different. Like, that's like psychic mediumship versus like your intuition, that is just like the source of information that can just be like constantly tapped into. For me, I'm like, I think that's just my higher self. Like, I hadn't really like
Hmm.
placed it like that before. I just kind of was like, it is what it is, and here we go.
Hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. How about you, Lisa?
What do you mean? Like, do I
Well,
see
like,
people's higher self?
yeah.
And like, does it embody in something or in a way?
Um, yes, when it's specific to the message in which is
Hmm.
coming through for the individual. So
Yeah.
when
Mhm.
I tap in and I like just open up channels. So all my readings and stuff, I just open up channel 3D Lisa, and then I open up a channel. And when that channel comes through, it's like I said, the steady knowing, I just like spout out a bunch of information. I don't ask anything of them first. And then when their higher self comes through with a specific themed kind of energy, I'll be like, okay, they're coming through as this really divine goddess energy. And so it's not even so much that I can see her eyes and her whatever, like the real divinity of a goddess
Hmm.
vibration holds a frequency, like a color holds a frequency kind of thing. It's hard to describe it. You just identify it through the frequency. So I'll be like, you're holding a really like knowledgeable, the depth of your higher self is like coming through with this really strong wisdom of the divine feminine
Hmm.
right now. And I feel like that is a lot of like what you're growing with right now. And then it won't like transform into certain things, but like it's almost like they come through in a vibrational frequency that I can understand through the specific message in which they're conveying. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah, that's similar to me. Like they show us that orb, but then that orb speaks like telepathically,
Hmm.
claircognizantly, but then there's also this feeling that comes through that I would say something similar, like there's a goddess energy to it, or I
Hmm.
don't see it change though. Like visually, it stays this like light energy, but it explains so much in the energy.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's very different though. I find it's very easy to know when it's someone's higher self versus a
Hmm.
spirit or
Oh, yeah,
an
for
ET or
sure.
Yeah.
something. The higher
Yeah.
self has a completely different frequency and
Yeah.
Hmm.
it's probably one of the strongest, but I find also easiest to tap into for a person.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think it's probably because it connects into the human person that's like literally vibrating right in front of
Yeah.
you. You're feeling that, and then it just goes like higher or faster.
Yes. Like
Hmm.
a,
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Yeah. I agree.
It's,
Um, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, it's cool that because we haven't really like talked about the nuts and bolts of this before,
Mhm.
even just like as friends. Um, but we all kind of experience like the same thing. It's the same
Mhm.
shades of like how it unfolds just based on how we interpret,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which I think is really cool. But anyways, what were
You
you
know
gonna say?
what can be frustrating for clients is when they say, I want you to describe and tell me all about my guides. Because some people can just go in and be like, oh, your guide, you have a male guide and he looks like this. And you have a female guide on this side and she looks like this. And she's from the area and he's an Andromeda. And like for me, that is not how it works for me. And I'm like, if that's what you want, then you're going to have to go to somebody else. I have very clear messages from them. I can receive very clearly the frequency and the energies in which they emit. If they choose to um, come forward in a like kind of like a representation of sorts, sometimes it's color, sometimes it is masculine or feminine. Sometimes they will do this to make the person feel more comfortable, but rarely, mostly it's like your guides are like you have one that's right here and it's a baby and this baby comes through with this, or you have like an angel, it's very much angelic energy. Like I can very much determine and be like, you have galactic guides or really old, like high council guides, right? Because that's the frequency that I am receiving. But if I'm like, oh yeah, she is blonde and she like, I can do that a lot of times when a loved one will come across and they're trying to give me specifics so the individual can put who it is. They'll be like, oh, mom's side, yeah, like smell, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
But guides too, more than like being like a specific character kind of thing, they'll come through with the vibration in which they were kind of contracted to guide you, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
Guides have a
interesting.
very different energy, but they're with the higher self when they come through. It's like this
Mhm.
little collective, whatever. And then any kind of
Mhm.
counsel that comes through, lots of times loved ones will just be on the side. They have very different energies, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
it's
then when
interesting.
someone, they keep saying to say, sometimes, like you never are going to show up without your higher self. It's not like someone does a reading and I'll be like, sorry, you don't have a higher self. Like it doesn't work that way. But sometimes it's really hard to bring through the messages because it's not because your higher self doesn't want to speak. It's because the disconnect or the like guardedness around an individual's energy field or heart or whatever that has disconnected them from the fluidity of receptivity of their higher self isn't easily available. And so I'm like, all right, give me a crack. Like if I just get a crack in there, I'll just try to get into your heart space a little bit because that's always like the gateway. And then I'll they'll give me things that like will open the crack so that it'll hit them a little bit and they'll be okay, like, okay, yeah, yeah, that might be true.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe a little
Mhm.
bit, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I find too with guides, because it's the same for me, Lisa. Like I can't just roll call like, here's all the guides you have and have ever had. They just don't present that way. They show up as like, I'm here to say this, and this is what
Yeah.
we're working on, and like this is what we're talking about. Going back to when the last couple episodes where we talked about, like we get what we get, right? Like we don't have
Yeah.
control over who steps forward or how they step forward. Um, but the tricky thing for me is they're like, do they have a name? And I'm like, old man? I don't know. There's no name. No
Yeah.
name coming through. It's just an energy. Like you can make a
Yeah.
name.
Mhm.
And one time there was
Make a
a
name.
spicy little guide and he was like, names are like a construct. We don't you don't have to have a name. Like call me what you want. I don't care.
Frequency.
Most
Just like
times
yeah.
they just give it a frequency or something
Yeah.
in which they were named at some point
Yeah.
that can like align with the frequency. That, yeah.
Hmm.
Same thing with like auras, right? Like reading people's auric fields. It's not like I see red around someone as I see red in the same, but red's energetic frequency is what I will see around. So I'll see like, oh, if somebody's has the frequency of red, it I can kind of put together that they're like a certain personality type when it's authentic to them, right? It's like they emit a certain vibration that is a similar vibration as a color. So I'll be like, oh yeah, that's a typical yellow. Or yeah, that's a blue free, that's a blue aura. Or like, yeah. And then people will be like, you legit see colors. And I'm like, not the same way as I see pink, right? Like I don't
Mhm.
see pink all around someone, but I see the energetic frequency of pink. Does that make sense to you guys?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's hard to explain when it's like that, but like same thing is if somebody's wearing an auric field that's really authentic or they're disconnected from their like authentic vibration, I'll be like, all right, like they're, like let's get more into like waking up their authenticity first because that's gonna make this a heck of a lot easier when they start vibrating in an authentic way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Do you ever find higher selves, like the energy of them, a lot to tune into? Like intensity wise?
Like for somebody else or your own?
Somebody else, yeah. Or maybe your own.
Well,
That's fair.
some are easy, they'll show up easier. Like some of them
Mm,
are like, no, this it's not open. They're
Mm-hmm.
not open to be able to come to, because lots of times I'll have conversations with people's higher self if I really
Mm-hmm.
need to, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
instead of clock, because the human self is like, no, that's barking down the wrong
Mm-hmm.
tree. But sometimes people's higher selves do not show up when I'm requesting a one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
Sending a meeting invite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that too. But I find like if they choose not to show up, they're choosing not to show up, but I don't find the higher self energy challenging to sustain like I do sometimes with certain galactics or like
Oh
angelic
yeah.
beings where their frequency is so high, it's like trying to hold the chin up, like you can only do it for so long and then you can't. The higher selves, I always find it to be very steady.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's
Yeah.
so like neutral steady
Mm-hmm.
in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
I
steady.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes you see people's higher self, like they'll show up kind of funny, where they'll be like over there, like leaning against a tree or like sitting on the ground or
Yeah.
something. I'll be like, whoa, you're disconnected from your higher self. And they're like,
Yeah.
just waiting here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because nothing I do or say is gonna make a difference to this person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Lisa, you bring up a good point too about talking with other people's higher selves. I that comes up in readings a lot, and I do it a lot in relation to if I'm having a hard time human to human. I will have a conversation with their higher self. Sometimes it's like it's not like I'm tuning into people's higher selves and being like, give me the information from them. That is
Yeah,
not
because they
it. It's
won't.
yeah,
Yeah, they
it's
won't.
more I'm like, "Hey, I would like to share some thoughts and feelings and would like to make a request or,
Yeah.
open up." And I'll say they're saying the caveat of like it has to be from a good intention, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere, and that
Yeah.
Yeah.
higher self always has the free will to be
Yes.
like meeting request
The
declined.
crack. Yeah, the
But
crack to get
yeah.
in, right?
Yeah.
That's always from their
Mhm.
higher self.
But
You
it's like
cannot manipulate a higher self.
No,
no.
it's no,
Yeah.
there's no
You
such thing.
you
It can't,
cannot.
it can't because the
Yeah.
frequency is completely different. It's like you
Yeah.
just can't.
Yeah.
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 But I'll be like I'd love can we set something up where we can have a human to human conversation? Or I'm like I'm really struggling with why this person is doing X, Y, and Z. Can we be open to shifting that? Or like can I have can we align something where we can have a really like loving interaction around this? Or like I it's almost like an offering of like I'm my higher self and myself am offering to this person's higher self to shift a trajectory or a relationship or a experience that we're having. Um like even in
Cool.
arguments sometimes with my partner I'll be like, "Hey,
Yeah. Can you help
um
me out here?
I'd be happy to talk, but I'm still feeling a bit stubborn. So can we facilitate something?" Just to, again, with that intention of like, I'm trying to mend fences and the human
Yeah.
self is struggling with it or not sure how to do it or whatever.
Yeah.
It can be an offering, but
Yeah.
it's not ever a manipulation because it will not work.
Yeah. And it's almost like you receive from like the most loving parent in the world, like Johnny can't come out and play right now because they're working on their inner
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
So their
Mhm.
ability to show up is nil and be like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll come back later.
Yeah.
You
Or
know what I mean?
yeah, or it'll be like, you need to do something different. And I'll be like, okay.
Oh yeah.
Because, and that's one thing I really love about reading people's higher selves is they're like no bullshit. Loving, but
Yeah.
Oh, of
also like
course.
They're
we're
so to the
not
point.
we're not
Yeah.
messing around. Like it's like
Yeah.
this is what it is. If you want to ask the question, you're going to get the answer. It's always from love, but it's very like direct.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no
Very
coddling.
cool.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, this was fun.
That was fun.
Great. Yeah.
Any last higher self thoughts? Or hoodies, blankets, cats, whatever?
Always cats at the end of the day. When in
Always
doubt, get a
cats.
cat.
For me, it
Yeah.
has to be a dog. John would die, literally.
Yeah.
I
Not
overcame
cats.
my cat allergy, which was nice.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
I realized, well, first of all, I went and found where it was lying, right? Like where I was holding on to it
Yeah.
and obviously subconsciously. Um, and I just like nurtured the heck out of her and figured out the place in my body in which it was holding. And then when I will get kind of activations with it again, I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. I must be experiencing this and this and this, because that's kind of the energy in
Interesting.
which I hold the allergy in anyway.
Hmm.
Especially with cats, because they're such high vibration. They represent something so deep into who I am and my
Mm.
spiritual connection and my like higher self connection and connection to source. And so I see where that was challenged and stuff like that, and then how that was represented through cats in my life, and then where that was being held in my energy body, therefore producing the allergy. So
Hmm.
that's how I did it.
Interesting. That's really interesting. Cool.
Always comes back to
Anyway,
higher self.
always.
Yep. It totally
Okay.
does.
Amazing. Well, we hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave us
All the
any
things.
questions, comments, like, share, subscribe, and we're always open to new questions, comments, things that you might want us to touch on in future videos. So please feel free to leave those in the comments as well. And we hope that you have a wonderful week. Bye.